This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
Hello there and welcome to Global Business Africa. We'll be giving you insight into Africa's business and financial markets. I'm Uche Okoronkwo coming to you from Kenya's capital, Nairobi. Let's start with a look at the markets. Now, emerging market stocks bounced back today as hopes of stimulus certainly helped ease economic worries. Although US-China tensions did keep MSCI's index for developing world stocks on course for its biggest weekly decline in about 3 months. It did rise 0.6% today, but was set for a 1.6% weekly decline. That, of course, is its worst week in nearly 3 months. Meanwhile, South Africa's JSE was little changed today, with equities mixed. In Nigeria, the oil share was down, with FMCG firms Dangote Sugar and Nigerian breweries a drag on performance today. Both were down around 2% on the day. We also saw banks UBA and GT Bank joining them on the losers list. Now, also coming up on the show today, Egypt bets $138 billion to stimulate its economy amid the coronavirus pandemic. And nominees for the World Trade Organization Director General position continue appearing before the Governing Council. And an online dating app booms as restaurants remain closed and lovers stay at home in Nigeria. Now, the African Union Commission has launched an initiative which aims to secure as many COVID-19 vaccine trials as possible for the continent. The Africa CDC Consortium for COVID-19 vaccine clinical trials will have African countries work collectively in order to approach global vaccine developers and funders. CGTN's Coletta Wanjoy spoke to the director of the Africa CDC.
The Africa Centers for Disease Control and Prevention is concerned by the fast increase of COVID-19 cases on the continent. An average of 17,000 new cases are being reported every day. The continent is now looking at how to secure COVID-19 vaccines. Through a new initiative, the Africa CDC has begun engaging vaccine manufacturers and developers.
It's a complex issue to develop vaccines. It's a complex issue even to uptake for uptakes of vaccine. It's a complex issue to engage with the community. So I think we want to be sure that Africa CDC is pooling all the networks on the continent and the right partnerships to ensure that we fulfill that.
The Africa CDC is targeting to get more than 10 late-stage vaccine clinical trials to be carried out on the continent as soon as possible.
In an emergency, we are saying any vaccine that is promising anywhere and shows promise, we can test it on the continent as much as possible. Lastly is the clinical trials. We want to be sure that the sites are ready. So, for example, if the Oxford vaccine that Lane mentioned shows promise in South Africa, how can we expand that in several other places across the continent? Given the diversity of our continent, it's a continent of 1.3 billion.
So far, South Africa is the only country on the continent taking part in a COVID-19 vaccine trial. The vaccine being tested in South Africa was developed by the University of Oxford in the United Kingdom and is being tested in the UK and Brazil. The Africa CDC hopes that very soon, many more African countries will be engaged in similar COVID-19 vaccine trials. The plan for now is for African countries to participate in as many vaccine trials as possible, as well as other stages of the vaccine's development, as a way of positioning the continent for strategic acquisition as a bloc as soon as any vaccine is approved. Coletta Wanjoy, CGTN, Addis Ababa, Ethiopia.
Now, Russia has announced plans to produce 30 million doses of an experimental COVID-19 vaccine domestically this year. The head of the country's sovereign wealth fund also says that the country has the potential to manufacture a further 170 million doses abroad. This comes after the conclusion of the first human trial of the vaccine this week. Researchers concluded that the vaccine is safe for use and induces an immune response response through the strength of that response, though the strength of that response remains unclear. Now, the phase 3 trial involving several thousands of people is expected to be conducted at home and in 2 Middle Eastern countries as well. It will also begin after a 100-person phase 2 trial wraps up on August 3rd.
We will produce around 30 million vaccines in Russia this year. We are working with 2 of our portfolio companies, Airfarm and Allium, to produce those vaccines. But we are also working on several manufacturing partnerships in other countries. And we believe that Russian Gamaleya vaccine will be the first one regulatory approved in the market. I personally had vaccine injected. I had 5.5 level of antibodies after around 20 days of the first injection, and after the second injection my level increased above 10 for IgG. For comparison, actually people who've been very sick, they have level on average around 6, and you can actually donate plasma if your level is higher than 6. So now, having been vaccinated, I can actually donate plasma that will help other people who have COVID.
Well, let's move on now. Kenya's candidate to lead the World Trade Organization, Amina Mohamed, says that the body is in dire need of reforms. Now, this comes after nominations from 8 nations were submitted in order to replace Roberto Azevedo, who, of course, steps down on August 31st. Now, the successor is expected to steer reforms and negotiations in the face of rising protectionism, as well as a deep recession caused by the COVID-19 pandemic, and, of course, a growing trade tensions. The nominations include 3 African candidates, including Hamid Mamdou from Egypt, Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala from Nigeria, and Mohammed from Kenya. Now, this phase of the race starts up to 2 months of campaigning, followed by a final decision by consensus. The campaign is set to end on September 7th.
This vital system is being tested as never before. The WTO was already in difficulties before COVID-19 struck. Its negotiating function had faltered, with only limited successes in the last 25 years, despite the launch of the Doha round of negotiations at the beginning of the century. Trade tensions have increased, and the dispute settlement system has been compromised. There is widespread acknowledgement among WTO members that the WTO is in urgent need of reform.
Meanwhile, United Nations Aid Chief Mark Lowcock says that coronavirus support to poor nations has been grossly inadequate and is dangerously short-sighted. He also added that he has requested wealthy nations to donate billions more of dollars in assistance. This comes as the UN increases its humanitarian appeal to $10.3 billion in order to help about 63 states tackle the spread and destabilizing effects of the coronavirus.
I appreciate every country is being hurt by this pandemic, but I have to say that the response so far of wealthy nations who've rightly thrown out the fiscal and monetary rule books to protect their own people and economies, the response that they've made to the situation in other countries has been grossly inadequate, and that's dangerously short-sighted. The massive problem the world faces can be addressed with relatively little money, with a modicum of imagination, and if we park the old rules to reflect today's unique circumstances.
Well, let's head to Egypt now. The country has released its largest budget in history in order to help deal with the uncertainty imposed by the coronavirus pandemic. Now, the government says the $138 billion budget is aimed at stimulating its economy by increasing public investments in key economic sectors. Here's CGTN's Yasser Hakim with more details.
The 2020-2021 state budget is double last year's budget. What makes it unique is that it boosted expenditure on public investments. For example, health, education and housing increased by 70%, agriculture by 245%, and IT and communications by 300%. The Deputy Minister of Planning tells CGTN the aim is to stimulate the economy.
Our vision is that we encourage investments to help push economic growth. These investments create job opportunities and confidence in the economy. Most countries in the region have reduced expenditure on public investments in their budgets. We are doing the opposite. Instead of a policy of contraction, we are increasing public investments by over 47%.
The North African nation's budget sees a rise in salaries and pensions for citizens to be able to sustain the effects of the coronavirus. There's also an initiative to encourage spending and consumption.
The initiative is based on establishing a fund to subsidize low-interest loans for any products the citizens want to purchase except food. This is meant to increase consumption and expenditure in the market.
The initiative begins in 3 months.
One of the main aspects that stimulate the economy is consumption and expenditure by citizens. These will encourage shops to reopen, industries to operate again and create badly needed revenue, as well as increase local production and export rather than importing goods.
The government says these measures will push economic growth to 3 and 4% and avoid the slowdown that has hit most countries in the region because of a pandemic. Yes, Hakim, CGTN, Cairo.
Now, the cocoa market is currently seeing the steepest fall in demand in a decade. And that, of course, has thrown into jeopardy a plan by top producers Cote d'Ivoire and Ghana to guarantee some 2 million farmers a living wage. Now, leading chocolate makers had agreed to a proposal from the African nations last year to charge the industry a premium for cocoa beans and to guarantee a minimum income to farmers who earn just $1 a day. But the scheme, set to come into effect this October, was based on expectations that international cocoa prices would stay within average ranges. Instead, the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic on demand has driven them to their lowest in nearly 2 years, and they are now expected to stay weak for at least a year. Let's head to South Africa now, where inflation has dropped to its lowest level in almost 16 years. Statistics South Africa released the latest data this week, showing that the consumer price index rose just 2.1% in May, and that's from 3% in April. Here's Sumitra Naidu with more.
The demand for goods and services in South Africa is still declining. This is largely as a result of the hard lockdown instituted in March to curb the spread of COVID-19. Limited movement in a severely constrained economy was most evident in the transport sector.
Fuel prices dropped about 12% in April and about 12% in May. And overall, we're at just over 26% lower than this time last year. This is really the one big story in the May CPI. If we look at the month-to-month movement, we had a negative 0.6% change in the inflation rate from April to May. And all of this was made up by the transport category, which in this case was basically fuel prices.
Since April, taxi operators were only allowed 70% capacity, but the president bumped that up to 100% last week. With increased fuel demand and rising oil prices, inflation could start picking up again. The May CPI showed food and non-alcoholic beverages increased by 4.4% year-on-year. Administered costs, electricity in particular, has become more expensive for South Africans.
Goods and services that households typically buy is going up, but it's going up at a slower rate than what it went up previously. Hidden within the overall low inflation rate, there are certain products that are still kind of on the high side. We could look at some of your municipal services, such as electricity and water, municipal rates. These are in around about the 10% mark.
But with inflation way below at the bottom end of the Reserve Bank's target of 3 to 6%, many believe there's room for another rate cut.
This is the first time in many, many years that it's fallen below the 3% mark, which would indicate that from a broad economic perspective, that probably inflation is a bit lower than what the authorities would like to see. One doesn't want too little inflation in the economy because it means that people may delay purchases, and that's bad for overall demand. But you also don't want to see too much because then you lose value to your money too quickly.
A scenario the Reserve Bank is monitoring closely. But with an economic contraction of 7% expected this year, South Africans may just get a little bit more relief with another rate cut at the end of July. Sumisha Nadi, CGTN, Johannesburg, South Africa.
Well, let's now turn our attention to today's corporate headlines. Global commodities firm Glencore, Zambia subsidiary, called Mopani Copper Mines, has said that the country's mines ministry rejected its proposal to suspend operations. Now, the company is threatened by low copper prices and disruptions caused by the coronavirus crisis. Mopani says it will appeal against the decision and will continue mining operations pending the outcome of the appeals process. Meanwhile, Invest in Africa, an NGO that accelerates the growth of small and medium-sized enterprises in Africa, says it is partnering with the MasterCard Foundation to launch a program that will help support more than 8,000 micro, small and medium-sized enterprises in Eastern and Western Africa. Now, the Business Advisory and Support Program has made a commitment of $1.69 million to restore local economies by generating work opportunities for Africa's youth amidst the pandemic. And Twitter is investigating a massive hack in which high-profile users, ranging from Elon Musk to Joe Biden, had their accounts hijacked by scammers. The social network believes the scammers targeted its employees to gain access to internal systems. A total of 12.58 Bitcoin, worth almost $116,000, was sent to email addresses mentioned in the fraudulent tweets, and that's according to blockchain.com. Now, the fake post said that people had 30 minutes to send $1,000 in Bitcoin to receive twice as much in return. And British Airways, the world's largest operator of Boeing 747s, has announced that it will retire its entire jumbo jet fleet with immediate effect after the pandemic sent air travel into freefall. Now, BA had been planning to retire the aircraft in 2024, but with passenger numbers decimated this year and, of course, forecasts that it will be years before they recover, the airline said it was unlikely its 747s will ever operate commercially for it again. And that's a look at our corporate headlines. Well, let's take a short break now, still to come after this break. The World Bank calls on Uganda to scrap its social media tax. And Nigeria's real estate sector reels from the effects of the pandemic.
The world economy as we know it is about to change. Global business reports highlight emerging markets, developing countries, and dynamic sectors worldwide. We feature top analysts and newsmakers to provide perspectives on every facet of business. From an on-the-ground perspective, we provide you with balanced and objective assessments. Fast, sharp, and insightful. Global Business, only on CGTN.
Africa is the nexus of enterprise, and Global Business will tell you why it matters.
From the mega investment projects to multi-billion-dollar mergers and acquisitions.
Africa today collects, just in terms of revenues from taxes alone, $545 billion a year. If you take 10% of that and you devote it to the energy sector, problem solved.
All this on Global Business, weekdays at this time on CGTN.
Welcome back. Well, let's head to Uganda now. The World Bank has asked the nation to scrap its social media tax, arguing that it's difficult to collect and easy to bypass. The East African nation imposed the tax in 2018 in order to help curb online abuse and raise income for the government. The tax has instead reduced the proportion of internet users and widened the digital and income inequality in the country. CGTN's Isabel Nakiria has more details from Kampala.
Ugandan traders are throwing away produce that's going bad because they can't sell all of it on time. Campaigners say online marketing could have helped the vendors sell their produce much faster. But due to a social media tax, they would need to pay 5 cents every day to access online networks. They say that's too costly for their business.
COVID-19 has taught us that it is really imperative that we find a way to be able to communicate, to be able to move products, and this is really a crucial aspect that can be used. Whether you are a simple farmer with pineapples in central Uganda, you need to be able to send a WhatsApp message to the dealer to say, okay, now I have the pineapples, please come and pick them up.
The World Bank argues the tax is reducing the proportion of internet users and widening digital inequality. A report by e-commerce retail group Jumia found that last year there was a 15% drop in internet users after the introduction of the social media tax. There is also concern that the tax is curtailing innovation.
We are really reaching that point where a young individual in Uganda who is very creative, who is very smart, has no access to either information, but at the same time cannot explore their mind and be able to leverage all the available tools that are available on the internet and on social media.
President Yoweri Museveni said the tax would help stop online gossip and raise revenue for the government. But only 17% of the tax revenue collection was achieved in the financial year ending 2019. Opposition politicians in Uganda say Mr. Museveni's intention was to silence his critics.
That's the mistake that Mr. Museveni did. He thought that by introducing the tax, there would be fewer people because it's expensive to access social media. But Ugandans are desirous for change. They're hungry for change. So those that are able to pay, they will pay. They will do everything they can because that's the platform that they have to air out their views.
The government has ignored requests from rights groups to suspend the tax during the coronavirus pandemic. The World Bank says the tax undermines efforts to promote public health and safety campaigns to reach a wider audience. Uganda's finance ministry says the tax is going nowhere. However, the government is reviewing the matter and will come out with recommendations on how best it will implement the tax in future. Isabel Nakiria, CGTN Kampala, Uganda.
Now, Egypt had reopened its airspace and hotels for travelers since the beginning of this month. Their aim, of course, is to revive the aviation and tourism sectors, which have been shattered by the coronavirus epidemic. Well, CGTN's Yasser Hakim has that report.
It's been a long time coming. The resumption of flights is a welcome development for the tourism and aviation sectors. But the reopening comes with stringent safety measures in all airports due to the coronavirus. The Minister of Aviation has been present for a final review of the reopening process.
Where we have placed the markets in the airports ensures at least 2 meters of social distancing between the passengers. We have also installed thermal cameras everywhere. They can spot people who are not wearing masks and can measure their temperatures. If a passenger's temperature is too high, it gives off an alarm so that officials can deal with the case. We also sanitize all luggage before the passengers collect them, as well as sanitizing the entire airport. And there are disinfectants everywhere for public use.
The first day has not seen much activity. However, state carrier Egypt Air's first flight after reopening has taken it to Tunis, with 200 passengers on board. The highest traffic is expected at Cairo International Airport, as well as 3 other cities.
The Egyptian government announcement resuming inbound tourism to 3 governorates: South Sinai, the Red Sea, and Matruh. The 3 governorates were selected because they witnessed the lowest number of coronavirus cases in Egypt, and because they are all open-air cities on the beach with a warm and dry weather.
Meanwhile, over 300 hotels that have passed the coronavirus safety tests have been given licenses to reopen. Although they are only allowed to operate at 50% capacity, hotel executives are excited and say they're ready to receive guests.
anything better than 0%. It's one step ahead from the bad days. When we started to hear about the COVID-19, we started immediately our proactive precautions, let's put it this way. The proactive precaution came from disinfection. We increased our teams of hygiene and the inspections. Number two, we started to share all our info with our team in regard to distance, in regard to handshake.
Any hotel that breaches the health and safety measures will be shut down and lose its license. The tourism industry, a main source of hard currency for Egypt, has lost $6 billion from mid-February to May, and the aviation sector lost about $2.5 billion in the same period. Egypt has been officially declared as a safe-to-travel country by the World Travel and Tourism Council. Officials hope this would encourage travelers to choose Egypt as their next destination. Yes, Hakim for CGTN, Cairo.
And heading to South Africa now, the country has reinstated a ban on alcohol sales. President Cyril Ramaphosa said liquor was being abused and is causing a massive burden on the health system. Now, South Africa has passed the 300,000 mark for new COVID-19 infections. New cases have been rising rapidly in recent weeks, prompting the president to now tighten lockdown regulations. Here's Sumitra Naidu reporting.
With South Africa now in the eye of the COVID-19 storm, government is concerned about the health system being burdened by alcohol-related incidents.
There are a number of people who have taken to organizing parties, who have drinking sprees, and some who walk around in crowded spaces without the protection of masks.
The liquor industry says it was caught off guard by the new ban and has warned of dire consequences should the ban remain in place.
The sudden ban really came as a massive blow to our industry, considering the fact that we had been in constant contact with both the DTIC and the Coronavirus Command Council.
We have since written to the president to let him know our view of his decision, to express our views around this decision. We have given him a deadline of the 24th of July to revert back to us with some of the demands that we've put in that letter that we sent to you.
The South African liquor industry employs almost 1 million people.
For the initial part of the ban that was implemented at the end of March, we anticipate job losses of up to 18,000 people, with up to 80 of our sellers potentially having to close their doors. Unfortunately, we'll only really see in the coming weeks and months what the true impact has been.
Exports of alcohol will still be allowed during this time, but one of the major concerns surrounding the return of the ban is the increase of illicit sales. In the first 9 weeks of lockdown, the alcohol industry lost over $1 billion in revenue and just over 20 million in excise tax.
Liquor in particular is a very big South African industry. It's something like 3% of the GDP. That's of the entire economy. So this is really big, and the impact on the economy is very serious indeed, and will destroy the lives of thousands of people.
It's a moral dilemma. The South African government is trying to curb the spread of COVID-19 and wants to save those infected, but it can't if it allows drinkers and the alcohol industry to continue as normal. Sumitra Naidu, CGTN, Johannesburg, South Africa.
Now, in Nigeria, the real estate sector is reeling from the effects of the coronavirus pandemic. The crisis in Africa's biggest economy has been made worse by the devaluation of the local currency. Well, CGTN's Teji Badmus looks at whether easing restrictions could present a recovery for the sector.
Nigeria's real estate sector was already experiencing a slowdown before the COVID-19 pandemic hit the nation. Now, the sector is almost at a standstill. And one man who is really feeling the pinch is Dejo Olawanyi. An architect and an estate developer, Olawanyi has had to drastically scale down his operations following the outbreak of the deadly virus and the several restrictions imposed by the government to curb its spread.
To sell a house is one of the most difficult things to do now, because the essential services are the ones that are really important, because those are the things that have to do with food. Even clothing is not important. So real estate is crashing. It's go all over the place. People are even dropping from expensive rents or mortgages to lower ones because they can't afford it.
With buyers for property drying up, work at most construction project sites have slowed down. Real estate developers are unsure on how to proceed in the face of the uncertainty in the industry.
Most people that import from China, from Europe, in the markets, they have not been importing for months. Some from January, February, containers are not coming. Even when you want to buy, because of the exchange rate, the prices have gone up, at times double, at times 60% increase or more.
It's a tough time for a once booming sector that also provides jobs for thousands. Empty houses now litter major cities like Lagos and Abuja, waiting for buyers. New projects are far and few in between, and there's no certainty yet when things would pick up for the sector.
Definitely there is a new normal, and the new normal is that things are never going to be the same again. We have to cope with it. We have to slash our prices. We have to encourage people to buy. We have to also make sure that we live safe. Just like Jack Ma said, if you have been able to survive this COVID-19, you have made profit this year, because a lot of people have died.
It's those words that have kept Olawanyi going as his business takes a heat from the virus. And he remains optimistic that no matter how long it takes, the current difficult period his industry is facing will eventually pass. But certainly, there will be casualties. Deji Batman, CGTN, Lagos, Nigeria.
Well, let's take a short break now, but still to come. Russia to mass produce an experimental vaccine for COVID-19. And we take a look at measures employed by China as it continues to open up its financial markets.
Business in Africa is at a crossroads. We celebrate those who are adopting and thriving despite the challenges, from grassroots to big businesses. Global Business takes you along for the ride as we track the making of a giant.
Only on CGTN.
At just about 1:30, let's recap today's top headlines. Leaders of Libyan tribes affiliated to General Khalifa Haftar have given their permission to Egypt's president and its army to intervene in the conflict. Now, President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi has answered the call by vowing to protect Libya's sovereignty. That's, of course, should it be threatened. Now, Libya's East-based lawmakers have also urged for Egypt's direct military support. And the Sudanese government and a coalition of 9 opposition groups have entered into a final phase of peace talks. The government and the Sudanese Revolutionary Front are currently holding face-to-face talks in Juba. The government is also negotiating separately with a second coalition. And the spread of COVID-19 in Ghana has hampered efforts to overhaul the voters' register. The government insists that it needs to be done soon, with just 5 months to go to the general election. While Ghana has won international praise in recent years for the running of its elections, there have been political disagreements over which voters should be eligible to vote and whether overseas Ghanaians should be included. And funding shortfalls are now hampering efforts to contain the latest Ebola outbreak in the Democratic Republic of the Congo. In the last 3 weeks alone, about 28 cases have been confirmed so far. And that is a recap of today's top headlines. Well, Well, let's get some international news now. European Union leaders have met for the first time since the coronavirus pandemic plunged the bloc into its latest crisis. Following the imposition of strict measures, leaders were forced to bump elbows and nod heads as a form of greetings. The 27 EU heads gathered in the Brussels EU headquarters in an attempt to clinch a deal on a multi-billion euro recovery fund for the bloc's economies. Well, Czech Prime Minister Andrej Babis proposed the allocation should be based on the downturn in a country's growth due to the coronavirus pandemic. European Council President Charles Michel also recently proposed that 70% of the recovery funds should be committed in 2021 and 2022, depending on the depth of the recession in each nation over the next 2 years. Now for a look at China's foreign exchange market in the first half of this year, where settlements by commercial banks rebounded from last year's deficit to a surplus. Now, forex regulators say the improvement showed that foreign investors remain confident about their operations in China.
Chinese banks purchased $950 billion worth of foreign exchange from January to June, while selling $875 billion. That led to a net settlement surplus of $79 billion, up from a $56 billion deficit by the end of last year. Wang Chunying, the deputy head of China's forex regulator, said the fluctuation was relatively small and wouldn't tip the balance of country's foreign exchange market.
Companies and individuals were more inclined to settle than buying, but their foreign exchange deposits did not increase much, and the RMB exchange rate has been steady, so the forex market is balanced in general.
The surplus did reflect China's success in its coronavirus containment and continued opening up policies.
We have brought the coronavirus pandemic under control and resumed production on a large scale. That helped boost confidence among foreign investors. Also, China was one of a few countries that attracted more outbound direct investment despite the pandemic. Our opening up policies proved to be appealing.
China's A-share market saw a wave of sell-offs by foreign investors in March. That occurred as opening up measures exposed domestic stock markets to more global turmoil. But the markets quickly rebounded and attracted $23 billion from overseas in the second quarter. Reduced international travel during the pandemic has also weakened demand for foreign exchange. China posted a $34 billion current account deficit in the first quarter. Officials say that could also reverse to a surplus for the first half of 2020 thanks to a fast recovery in exports. Gao Songya, CGTN.
Well, let's stay with China's economic performance. Of course, the country did report an economic expansion in the second quarter of this year. While CGTN's Michael Wang now takes us through measures to open up the country's financial markets in the first half of this year.
It's been a roller coaster ride for global finance amid the coronavirus pandemic, but the virus hasn't slowed down the opening up of China's financial markets in the first half of 2020. At the beginning of the year, China lifted foreign ownership caps on futures and life insurance businesses. And in April, foreign limits on securities and fund management firms were scrapped as well. Foreign financial institutions took notice, moving to increase their presence in China in a whirlwind first half. In this time, Goldman Sachs, Morgan Stanley, and Credit Suisse all received the go-ahead to take a majority stake in their China securities joint ventures. JP Morgan got the nod in June to set up China's first foreign wholly owned futures business. Fitch received approval to rate Chinese issuers and insurers. And American Express secured its position as the first foreign credit card company to launch operations on the Chinese mainland in a joint venture. Goldman Sachs and Credit Suisse are both seeking eventual full ownership of its China joint ventures, as is UBS, which received approval to take a majority stake already back in 2018 and currently holds a 51% share in its China JV. Here's Eugene Tian, chairman of UBS Securities.
I think the benefits of a majority stake by the group in locally incorporated UBS Securities come in many different ways. The first one is the alignment of interests of UBS Group globally with the interests of local security JV UBS Security. So the second benefit for UBS Securities as well as the group is the integration of onshore and offshore business.
Meanwhile, China has one of the highest household savings rates in the world. At over 30%, that translates into trillions of dollars of investable assets. This vast pool of potential retail funds has led global asset managers to jostle for ground here in China as well. BlackRock, Neuberger Berman, and Fidelity International have all applied to set up their fully owned mutual fund businesses in China in H1 2020. That's while other fund management giants such as Vanguard, VanEck, and Schroders are reportedly planning to apply as well. On the insurance front, Allianz opened China's first fully foreign-owned insurance holding company in January, with HSBC announcing it will acquire the remaining 50% equity interest in its China insurance joint venture in May. Well, first half 2020 also saw China officially removing QFII and RQFII quotas and launching the Wealth Management Connect pilot scheme. The moves are set to drive more institutional funds into China's A-shares and spearhead the initial opening of the country's $3 trillion bank wealth management product market. The opportunities for foreign financial institutions are clear.
I have to say the most important opportunities in the long run or in the near, medium and long run are that the wealth creation as well as the really ever-increasing demand for onshore-based investors. That means corporate investor companies, institutional investor, large financial institutions, as well as individual, especially the high-end wealth management individual, the rich individual, the well-to-do families. When it comes to the real time now is to diversify globally and to do some proper global asset allocation from China. I think that will represent one of the most exciting opportunities for groups like UBS.
As protectionist sentiments rise due to the pandemic and geopolitical tensions, China's commitments to liberalize and boost access to the country's nearly $50 trillion financial services market has gone the other direction, charging full steam ahead towards greater opening. Michael Wong, CGTN.
And still in China, the international service sector in Chengdu is planning to restart after the COVID-19 pandemic put commerce on hold for months. Now, business owners set up stalls at one of the city's largest international communities over the weekend in order to show that they still have a lot to offer. Here's CGTN's Mark here with that report.
Food, drinks, and a jazz band. This is not a carnival in town, but a weekend street market in Chengdu.
Well, this is one of the largest international neighborhoods in the city called Tongziling. While people here are enjoying a special weekend out, stall owners from over 10 countries are bringing out their best products in an effort to reboot business after the pandemic.
We close like February and March, and then we start. When we start, business is growing up and up. And this is like good advertisement.
We actually were underprepared in the sense that we didn't bring enough food to sell, and we are now fairly fast.
I opened the shop 4 months ago. Today is 4 months. We came here to take part in this event, and pretty fast we've got sold out.
Around 4,000 international residents now live in the Tongziling community. They speak fluent Chinese and love the laid-back lifestyle of the city. Many have chosen to stay even during the pandemic.
And during that time as well, since I'm doing a lot of voluntary work here at the community, and they required a lot of assistance, especially with regards to talking to the expats living around here, because this neighborhood has the highest percentage of expats living in Chengdu. We were able to talk to them, make them feel relieved, and just let them know the things they need to do to stay safe.
After the city relaxed restrictions on outdoor gatherings, they've been seeking ways to get in touch with their Chinese neighbors again. The event planner said the weekend street market was a successful start.
We have 26 businesses signed up for tonight. At first, they didn't quite understand what a street stall is. Now they've seen the benefits and they're asking us to hold more. This kind of event is also important because it helps prevent misunderstandings or biases that we saw emerge during the epidemic. Let people know that virus has no nationality and that we are all proud members of the community.
The street market has also attracted fashion icons and local celebrities to join. And as a special treat, one of the event's sponsors brought out the most famous piece in its collection, a vintage convertible used as a prop by Chinese musician Jay Chou in his latest music video, Mojito. 百克 CGTN 成都。
Meanwhile, the China Cartoon and Game Expo is currently taking place in Shanghai. It is a chance to showcase industry trends and developments, as well as bring gamers and fans together. CGTN reporter Lin Nan has the story.
An annual carnival for gamers, cosplayers, and animation fans. The 2020 China International Cartoon and Game Expo, or CCG, opened in Shanghai on Thursday. The 5-day event showcases the latest cartoons, games, and related merchandise.
I bought garage kits of my favorite characters. I started playing with them 3 years ago and have spent a few $1,000s on them.
After the success of Chinese animations in recent years, such as Ne Zha and Wo Xiaohei, the issue of developing premium cartoons and animation intellectual property has arisen.
I bought some T-shirts and toys of the Chinese animation Luo Xiaohei today. I want to show my support for the cartoon, and it's fun to play with these toys.
A design competition called Shanghai Gift has been organized at this year's CCG. It's showcasing merchandise jointly created by Chinese animation IPs and traditional domestic brands. One product is a series of pencil sharpeners made by Auto World and Chonghua Pencil. Auto World is one of the most popular animation series among teenagers in China. It's been producing IP-related merchandise since its debut nearly 5 years ago.
In China, the business environment for animation is different from abroad. People don't have the habit of paying to watch shows on platforms, so we have to develop IP-related products to make a profit and develop our company's sustainability.
Chonghua Pencil, produced by China's first pencil company, is a household brand in China dating back to the 1930s. Although it's an old company, it's targeting a young market, students. Working with Auto World has helped the brand attract young customers.
It is vital for us to make the brand younger and desirable and win the hearts of Generation Z. Our experience in manufacturing and supply chain will bring high-quality products to the market. And I'm very optimistic that through the cooperation with Auto World, our products can reach more people.
Experts say creating such platforms for cooperation at the Expo shows collaborating with traditional domestic brands is a way for Chinese animation IPs to create more products and increase their commercial value. It will take them from a niche market to a bigger audience and wider demographic.
The sales and market size of traditional brands are always much bigger than that of cartoon merchandise. Such collaborations will help both sides expand untouched market and increase brand awareness and sales. This trend of the animation industry is at an early stage. It has huge potential and it's accelerating.
Linan, CGTN, Shanghai.
Well, let's shift focus now. And here's a quick look at today's commodity markets. Oil prices slipped on the back of growing uncertainty about the global recovery and, of course, its impact on fuel demand. Also, major producers are set to ease output curbs. Brent crude futures fell about 26 cents to $43 a barrel today, while we saw West Texas Intermediate dropping about 23 cents. Meanwhile, gold prices steadied today near the $1,800 per ounce level after a sharp fall in the previous session. Of course, worries over surging coronavirus cases and U.S.-China tensions did underpin its safe haven appeal, though a stronger dollar did cap those gains today. Well, let's head into a short break now. Coming up still. An online dating app booms as restaurants remain closed and lovers stay at home in Nigeria.
Images may appear to be identical,
but looks can be deceiving. The difference is not always obvious. It has to be discovered. There are always different sides to a story. We put the focus on the details. To see more, to understand better. CGTN. See the difference.
Now, biofuels have been touted as the fuel of the future, but years later, the biofuel revolution that was promised is still yet to be fully seen. While a small company in East Africa discovered that a once neglected indigenous plant that grows only in sub-Saharan Africa could be the next big biofuel on the continent. Here's the story of the croton nut. This is the croton tree. It is native to East Africa, and thousands grow wild across Kenya. These overlooked plants were typically used for firewood and shade. But it turns out the croton tree's nut is an excellent source of biofuel.
I realized the communities around were not so motivated to plant trees or conserve the available trees. Actually, they were becoming more of a threat to the available natural resources. So this pulled me into trying to see how can we play in between conservation and motivation. So it was my work to really talk to the communities. I will move out to different parts of this region. And so long as I identify the tree is available, then you educate people. You educate them about why it's important to conserve it, the value they can get by selling to you that.
This one I'm not the one who planted them. My father planted them. For that time, we was not knowing about the croton nuts, but we plant these trees for charcoals, firewood, and fence. We are going on planting many trees because this time or these days, croton nuts is money. When you collect the nuts, you get money.
We are able to extract about 10% from oil from the old nut. So 90% is biomass, which is having the cake. Cake is very rich in protein. And so this becomes a poultry feed protein supplement. The other biomass, which is now the husk becomes a major component of our fertilizers. And our fertilizer is organic. Our production per month, the capacity is 600 tons per month. We started the company with 4 people. That was the directors and all the employees. We were 4. It has grown to, as we talk now, we are 40. We are 40 permanent employees, and then we have daily casual workers who are working weekly and a month or 2 under contract. They range between 15 to 20 every day. So with us as a company, our success is not just the millions of money we can get. Our success is to see our environment is conserved. we are the only people in the market who are doing this. We are setting the pace, going through a lot of challenges, of course, as a new thing. I see in the future it's going to be a very major thing.
Well, let's head to Nigeria now, where an online dating company called Vibe says the number of people signing up for its services each month has risen by 20% since the coronavirus outbreak. Now, the spike in subscription inspired the organizers of a speed dating service to launch an online service, Dating in Quarantine, which now matches people on anonymous phone call dates. Here's CGTN's Beryl Oro with that story.
Bars and restaurants in Lagos are shut, and Nigerians struggle to go out and socialize, and grooming standards have dropped. But for some, this is the perfect time to find a soulmate.
The dating thing, like during this restriction, it works perfectly for me because I'm really an indoors person. I'm not the type of person that would go out and stay out. Like, I like coming back home. I like my bed. I like my house. I'm safe, I'm comfortable here.
Sparked by the coronavirus, Akinao and others like him are driving a boom in online dating tailored for Nigerian professionals in what is described as the new normal.
Coronavirus has weirdly been good for us because I think a lot of more people, like because of the restrictions about going around and how they can interact with people, like they've turned online for solutions. So we've had like a lot of growth. We've had like a 30% growth in user registration on the app.
Vibe, which went live in April 2019, has seen user numbers grow to roughly 8,000 as movement restrictions push people to seek intimacy online.
Lounges are closed. People can't meet for first dates unless they meet at people's homes and locations, which people didn't feel was really safe. So we decided to do something that had to do with online dating so people could meet and have first dates online.
It removes all those visual stimulants. So like you're no longer really focused on what the person looks like, but you're focusing on the questions, on the answers to the questions that you're hearing from the person. So it feels more personal than before.
Vibe organizes game nights and speed dating sessions online, allowing subscribers and clients to meet and connect with potential forever soulmates in unprecedented times. Beryl Oro, CGTN.
Well, before we go, let's take a quick look at Africa's currencies today. South Africa's rand weakening, pausing a recent rally, as disappointing Chinese consumption data did dampen investor hopes of a quick economic recovery from, of course, this pandemic. Now, the rand has been at the mercy of global sentiment for the past few weeks. It's pulling away from the key 17 rand per dollar level, despite South Africa's creaking economy and, of course, its strained finances. Well, that's it for this edition of Global Business Africa. Remember, you can send your feedback to the contacts on your screen. You can also follow us on our various digital media platforms. From me, Uche Okoronkwo, and the rest of the team, thanks for watching.